Indonesian immigration. During the 1950s, many Indonesians came to America as students, hoping to receive a better education in the United States colleges. The ICA, or International Cooperation Association, is responsible for foreign assistance and non-military security programs. In 1953, they started providing scholarships for faculty members of the University of Indonesia, specifically for studying at the University of California at Berkeley. In 1956, they did the same with the University of Kentucky. This opportunity for education was a major pull factor in the immigration of Indonesians to the United States and was the reason for one of the major waves of Indonesian immigration to the United States. For centuries, Indonesia was under control of the Dutch. Eventually, in 1949, after years of guerrilla warfare, the Dutch recognized Indonesian independence. Independence movement leader Sukarno was brought back from exile to lead the country and was in power for 22 years. Under his rule, the Indonesian Communist Party gained massive influence and took control of all levels of government. In September of 1965, Suharto, a military leader, and his army took control of Jakarta, which is the capital of Indonesia. Anti-communists followed Suharto's army's lead and decimated the communists throughout Indonesia. They killed around 500,000 communists and destroyed the Indonesian Communist Party, which tipped the balance of power.
This period of violence spurred a wave of immigration from Indonesia to the United States. At the same time, the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 was passed in the United States, allowing Indonesian immigration to reach a new level, and permanent settlements grew by a substantial amount. However, within the next year, Suharto took over the government as the official president and began an era called the New Order, bringing economic stability with a pro-Western message and emphasis on American education. As peace re-emerged, the immigration wave halted. During the New Order, there was heavy pressure on Chinese Indonesians, an ethnic group that had been in Indonesia for hundreds of years, to fully assimilate into Indonesian culture, giving up their language, religion, and traditional festivals. During the 1990s, anti-Chinese sentiment grew, despite the efforts of President Suharto to show them as valuable members of society through TV programs depicting them donating money and doing other good deeds. When Suharto entered his seventh term as president after an uncontested election in 1998, many students and political activists rioted. During these riots, over 1,000 people died during lootings in Jakarta alone. Chinese stores were specifically targeted, especially by mobs. After the riots, tens of thousands of Chinese Indonesians emigrated, though most to Australia. There were also many issues with the Christians in Indonesia that motivated immigration. During the 1990s, Suharto replaced all of his Christian advisors with fundamentalist Muslims, creating a government that was likely to favor Muslims.
Christians, who were already in the minority, began to feel increasingly marginalized under his rule. In the late 1990s to early 2000s, there were many attacks on churches throughout the archipelago of Maluku, with forced circumcision and conversion of Christians by Muslims. There are still regular attacks on Christians by the Islamic Defenders Front, an extremist organization in Indonesia responsible for many hate crimes. Despite the hate crimes committed by the Islamic Defenders Front, they receive funding from the police to this day. Many conflicts and civil wars have broken out in Indonesia between Christians and Muslims. This violence has surprised people around the world because one of the guiding principles of Indonesia throughout history has been positive interfaith relations. To this day, tensions are very high between Christians and Muslims in Indonesia, which is still a cause for immigration. Because of these conflicts, between 1980 and 1990, the population of Indonesians in the United States tripled, reaching 30,000 people. There have not been any major waves of immigration from Indonesia since people came in the 1950s for education, and later when Chinese and Christians came to escape persecution. The majority live in Southern California, although Indonesian populations are also concentrated in New York and Washington, D.C. Although Indonesia is a predominantly Muslim country, because of the history of hardships for Christians and Chinese in Indonesia, these groups make up the majority of Indonesian immigrants to the United States. Overall, the number of Indonesians in the United States still remains very low, with them making up only 0.032% of the population.